Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Cam Kissy ASMR. Tonight I'm going to be reading you 3 stories from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I've been wanting to read scary stories and I forgot about this book, so I thought it would be a good start. So, without further ado, let's start off with the Windigo. A wealthy man wanted to go hunting in a part of northern Canada where few people have ever hunted. He traveled to a trading post and tried to find a guide to take him, but no one would do it. It was too dangerous, they said. Finally, he found an Indian who needed money badly, and he agreed to take him. The Indian's name was Defago. They made camp in the snow near a large frozen lake. For 3 days they hunted, and they had nothing to show for it. The third night, a windstorm came up. They lay in their tent listening to the wind howling and the trees whipping back and forth. To see the storm better, the hunter opened the tent flap. What he saw startled him. There wasn't a breath of air stirring, and the trees were standing perfectly still. Yet he could hear the wind howling. And the more he listened, the more it sounded as if it were calling Defago's name. Defago, it called. Defago. I must be losing my mind, the hunter thought. But Defago had gotten out of his sleeping bag. He was huddled in the corner of the tent, his head buried in his arms. "What's this all about?" the hunter asked. "It's nothing," Defago said. But the wind continued to call him, and Defago became more tense and more restless. Defago, it called. Defago. Suddenly, he jumped to his feet, and he began to run from the tent. But the hunter grabbed him and wrestled him to the ground. "You can't leave me out here," the hunter shouted. Then the wind called again, and Defago broke loose and ran into the darkness. The hunter could hear him screaming as he went. Again and again he cried, "Oh, my fiery feet, my burning feet of fire." Then his voice faded away, and the wind died down. At daybreak, the hunter followed Defago's tracks into the snow. They went through the woods, down towards the lake, then out onto the ice. But soon he noticed something strange. The steps Defago had taken got longer and longer. They were so long no human being could have taken them. It was as if something had helped him to hurry away. The hunter followed the tracks out to the middle of the lake, and there they disappeared. At first he thought that Defago had fallen through the ice, but there wasn't any hole. Then he thought that something had pulled him off the ice into the sky, but that made no sense. As he stood wondering what happened, the wind picked up again. Soon it was howling as if it had the night before. Then he heard Defago's voice. It was coming from above. And again he heard Defago screaming, "My fiery feet, my burning feet." But there was nothing to be seen. Now the hunter wanted to leave that place as fast as he could. He went back to camp and packed. Then he left some food for Defago, and he started out. Weeks later, he reached civilization. The following year, he went back to hunt in that area again. He went to the same trading post to look for a guide. The people there could not explain what had happened to Defago that night, but they had not seen him since then. Maybe it was the Windigo, one of them said, and he laughed. It's supposed to come with the wind. It drags you along at great speed until your feet are burned away, and more of you than that. Then it carries you into the sky, and it drops you. It's just a crazy story, but that's what some of the Indians say. A few days later, the hunter was at the trading post again. An Indian came in and sat by the fire. He had a blanket wrapped around him, and he wore his hat so that you couldn't see his face. The hunter thought there was something familiar about him. He walked over and he asked, "Are you Defago?" The Indian didn't answer. "Do you know anything about him?" No answer. He began to wonder if something was wrong, if the man needed help, but he couldn't see his face. "Are you all right?" he asked. No answer. To get a look at him, he lifted the Indian's hat. Then he screamed. There was nothing under the hat but a pile of ashes. That's the end of story 1. Story 2. The Dead Man's Brains. This scary story is a scary game that people play at Hallows Eve, but it can be played whenever the spirits move you. The players sit in a circle in a darkened room and listen to a storyteller describe the rotting remains of a corpse. Each part is passed around for them to feel. In one version, the player is out if he or she screams or gasps with fright. In another version, everybody stays to the end, no matter how scared they get. Here is the story. Once in this town there lived a man named Brown. It was years ago, on this night, that he was murdered out of spite. We have here his remains. First, let's feel his brains. Now here are his eyes, still frozen with surprise. This is his nose, here is his ear, and here is his hand rotting flesh and bone. But his hair still grows, and his heart still beats now and then, and his blood still flows. That's all there is, except for the worms. They are the ones that ate the rest of him. Story 3. May I carry your basket? Sam Lewis spent the evening playing chess at his friend's house. It was about midnight when they finished their game, and he started home. Outside it was icy cold and as quiet as the grave. As he came around and turned in the road, he was surprised to see a woman walking ahead of him. She was carrying a basket covered with a white cloth. When he caught up to her, he looked to see who it was, but she was so bundled up against the cold it was hard to see her face. "Good evening," Sam said. "What brings you out so late?" But she didn't answer. Then he said, "May I carry your basket?" She handed it to him. From underneath the cloth, a small voice said, "That's very nice of you." And that was followed by wild laughter. Sam was so startled that he dropped the basket, and out rolled a woman's head. He looked at the head, and he stared at the woman. "It's her head," he cried, and he started to run, and the woman and her head began to chase him. Soon the head caught up to him. It bounded into the air and sunk its teeth into his left leg. Sam screamed with pain and ran faster. But the woman and her head stayed right behind. Soon the head leaped into the air and again and bit into his other leg. Then they were gone. Let us read one more story, because these stories are really short. This one is called The Babysitter. The Babysitter. It was 9 o'clock in the evening. Everybody was sitting on the couch in front of the TV. There were Richard, Brian, Jenny, and Doreen, the babysitter. The telephone rang. "Maybe it's your mother," said Doreen. She picked up the phone. Before she could say a word, a man laughed hysterically and hung up. "Who was it?" asked Richard. "Some nut," said Doreen. "What did I miss?" At 9:30, the telephone rang again. Doreen answered it. It was the man who had called before. "I'll be there soon," he said, and he laughed and hung up. "Who was it?" the children asked. "Some crazy person," she said. About 10 o'clock, the telephone rang again. Jenny got to it first. Hello, she said. It was the same man. 1 more hour, he said, and he laughed and hung up. He said, 1 more hour. What did he mean? Asked Jenny. Don't worry, said Doreen. It's somebody fooling around. I'm scared, said Jenny. About 10:30, the phone rang once more. When Doreen picked it up, the man said, Pretty soon now, and he laughed. Why are you doing this? Doreen screamed, and he hung up. Was it the guy again? Asked Brian. Yes, said Doreen. I'm going to call the operator and complain. The operator told her to call back if it happened again, and she would try to trace the call. At 11 o'clock, the telephone rang again. Doreen answered it. Very soon now, the man said, and he laughed and hung up. Doreen called the operator. Almost at once, she called back. That person is calling from a telephone upstairs, she said. You'd better leave. I'll get the police. Just then, a door upstairs opened. A man they had never seen before started down the stairs toward them. As they ran from the house, he was smiling in a very strange way. A few minutes later, the police found him there and arrested him. I think that should do it for tonight's stories. I gotta say, I never realized how dry and bland these stories are. I mean, the last one, The Babysitter, had potential. The next thing you know, it just ended so simply. But I hope you guys enjoyed it regardless. And I hope you're asleep by now. If you are, that's amazing. And if you stayed till the end, just to stay till the end, I really appreciate it. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I try to post a video every day. So, stay tuned for more videos. Good night, everyone. Sleep good and Cam Kissy out. I love you guys.